Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the museum tonight for this special anniversary program. I'm Stephen Fagin, the curator, and it's always exciting when we have an opportunity to speak to someone who not just lived the experience of November 22nd, 1963, but lived it right here, right outside this building. Dr. Toni Glover is a professor of English at the University of Scranton in Pennsylvania, but she is here with us tonight as a child of Dealey Plaza, an 11-year-old who witnessed the assassination from the corner of Elm and Houston right outside here. And hers is a deeply moving story. She is one of the very few people in the 2,500 oral history recordings that we have at the museum who has brought me to tears. So be prepared if you have a Kleenex or a handkerchief handy, because it might get a little emotional tonight. But that's what we're here to commemorate. The 61st anniversary of the assassination is this Friday, and there's no better person to walk us through that experience than Dr. Toni Glover. Please join me in welcoming Toni to share her memories tonight.
That's the publisher.
Yeah. Toni, we're going to be seeing several images of you in Dealey Plaza because of your distinctive blue coat. You turn up in a number of home movies. Also, being elevated 4 feet off the ground made it easier, so thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
We see you here in a frame from the Mark Bell film, probably the best view we have of you as the motorcade made that fateful turn from Houston to Elm. But let's go back prior to November 22nd, because life for you didn't start the day of the assassination. In fact, that wasn't even the first time you wore that blue jacket. We're looking at some pictures here now of January '64, a little ways after the assassination, but that's you wearing that same coat that you had on in Dealey Plaza. Toni, tell us a little bit about the young girl who came to Dealey Plaza that day. What was life like for you at home?
Well, life's complicated. It's always complicated. I came to Dealey Plaza because I had magical thinking at the time. And I had had some problems at home, and my father was kind of mean from time to time. And I have a low voltage current of fear that runs around under my skin. And I've had that since I was about 5. And so everything I did was an attempt, not everything I did, that's exaggeration, but I made an effort to try and get rid of it, to do whatever I can, kind of like permanent goosebumps. And I thought that Kennedy had supernatural powers. And if I went to see him, and I could get him to look at me, if I could get him to wave, that would mean he knew me. And I'd seen pictures with Kennedy on a golf cart with all these kids, and I thought nobody would hurt a kid Kennedy knew. So this was my plan. I had this completely constructed, and I begged my mother over and over and over again to take me there. And I would tease her with, you know, Mom, they said that we don't have to go to school on Friday if we go to see the president. You know, Mom, if we park your car right down there, that would be a good place for it when we go to see the president. And maybe I'll write a paper about going to see and about the 5th time, my mother just looked at me and went, I'm taking you down there. You need to stop. Just stop asking me. So I did, and that was my plan. I came down, needed to be here early, need to have on the right thing. I was, you know, just shaking.
Before we get into that moment, there's another picture I want to put up here of you. That's you at the top of the image, still wearing that blue coat.
Yes, and, my sister Joan, okay, and my cousin Patty with the headband.
You came from a Nixon household, actually. Your parents
yeah.
were not Kennedy supporters.
Well, my dad wasn't, because he was building parts for critical aircraft for the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. So he was doing well, but if you're in the military in 1963, you were a Republican. And so he was. Yeah. Our next door neighbors were Catholic, and they had a Kennedy sign in their yard. And we had a Nixon sign in ours.
You've talked a little bit about the magic that you felt Kennedy kind of possessed at that time in the various conversations that you and I have had. I think it's safe to say that you saw in Kennedy kind of an idealized father figure, somebody diametrically opposite what you had at home. I wonder if you might talk a little bit more about that, about what you saw in Kennedy that was so special to an 11-year-old girl at that time.
Stability, something that could be relied on. Also, when I was 6 or 7, my parents had a pretty ugly divorce. And by the time I was 11, I was still fighting what kind of relationship I had with my dad and my mother and my siblings and trying to figure it out. So yeah, I saw him on the golf cart with kids and went, oh my. I saw the picture of John under the desk. And I just thought, this is somebody, and his job is to help us, right? Is to help all Americans. So if I can just get him to look at me and wave, he'll know I exist, and things will be good.
Yeah.
Magical thinking.
You turn up, as I mentioned, in several of the home movies. This is a frame from a film shot from this building. There was actually a home movie taken from the 4th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building by an employee here, a secretary with Scott Forsman Publishers, Elsie Dorman. So this is a frame from the Elsie Dorman film. And Toni, that is you with both hands raised up in the air, and your mom is standing with you on that little 4-foot pedestal.
Yes, she is. And I considered it quite the accomplishment to get her up there. It's 4 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
And she had to climb up on the fence and then get up on the pedestal, and then she wasn't going to stand up. So I thought, come on. So she stood up, and I kept a hold of her. Mm-hmm. But one thing is, those pedestals are not flat on top. Right. They have a peak that goes down them so the water will drain off. Mm-hmm. Well, that means if you're facing Houston, your feet are down. If you face Elm, there's one on either side. And it's not easy making those foot changes. So I was very concerned about her. And
she had a heart condition too, we should mention.
She had tachycardia pretty bad. She had ridiculously high blood pressure. So we were protective of her, especially post-divorce. We were trying to be very protective of her, the 4 girls who were still at home. And it was just instilled in me. Oh no, now I've got to get her out of Dealey Plaza and into the car and back to the house. I mean, I was thinking all of those kinds of things. And she said to me immediately, what? And I was the only one who could see his head explode from where we were standing. And everyone, you're denial. Oh, that didn't happen. So I looked at my mom. I said, somebody threw fireworks in the car and the police are really mad. I kept trying to downplay it so it wouldn't be so terrible. And we finally got off the pedestal, and I ran across the street to the deposit books, Texas School Book Depository, and Officer Baker's motorcycle was there. He had pulled up and run in to look for Oswald. And I ran over and was like trying to listen to see what had happened. You know, they're going to tell the police, so I'm trying to find out. And I heard wound and head, but there was nothing really clear.
Yeah.
So I just turned around and I went up and I said, Mom, they said it grazed his head, so we're okay. Let's go. Come on, let's go.
It's interesting, as an 11-year-old, you were trying to shelter your mother, because so often we hear stories about parents and teachers trying to shelter the kids at that time from tragic news of the assassination.
You know, Mom was great. She was in trouble. She was post-divorce and she had this blood pressure. And so we all just were trying to protect her. Mm-hmm. We were trying to, Jean and Joan and Sharon and I, who were the ones at home still.
We're going to look at a couple of home movies here. So this is a frame from the Dorman film where you can see Toni and her mom. And for the benefit of researchers watching this on YouTube, what was your mom's name, since she was an eyewitness?
Dorothy May Haley Glover.
Okay.
Her maiden name was Haley.
All right. So we're going to watch a segment from the Dorman film shot from this building as the motorcade made its way down Houston Street.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah, it's your show.
You know how Mom used to reach out and clap like this? That's what you see her doing.
And were you cheering, or?
I'm trying to get his attention. No, this is life and death to me.
Okay.
He needs to look at me.
Right.
He needs to look at my eyes, because I can't, I spent a lot of time setting this up, you know.
So here's a little bit of the Dorman film. God bless Elsie Dorman. She could not film very well at all. She was holding the camera beside her face. The only reason we see Toni is because the camera jerks around so much. But it's an extraordinary home movie, and the only known imagery shot from the building at the time of the assassination. Now, Toni, going back a little bit, you witnessed an important event in Dealey Plaza prior to the arrival of the motorcade. Yeah. There was a young man, Jerry Belnap, who had an epileptic seizure, and you were part of all that. Tell us about how that played out.
Well, one of the ways I got through life was to control everybody, everywhere, all the time, every day. And if I was taking control of it, I'm safe, you know, because I can control it. So I kept going back and forth from Elm to Main, running back and forth on Houston. I counted it at 63 steps. And I'd get down there and I'd try to look down Main to see if they were coming And I just, you know, and there was a wonderful policeman there. I've got to get his name. But he was on that corner. And when we were very early, I went down and I was like, when do you think they're going to, and talking to him. And I said, I'm Toni. And I don't remember him saying his name. But about the third time I came back down here, I was just so worried about it. And he said, they're going to come. And I was standing there and I went, and I just leaned over and let my, arms drop. And he thought it was hilarious. They're going to come down here. So on one of those trips, a guy fell. He hit his head on the side of the reflecting pond, and it cut it, and it appeared he was having a seizure. Some friend of mother's had seizures. I don't know why I remembered that. But, you know, my head was going, put something in his mouth so he doesn't swallow, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I'm 11. And there are a group of adults standing around here while I'm immediately down there trying to take care of it. And then some other people came over and took care of him, and I let it go right away. Mm-hmm. But I was scared to death they were going to change the route because it was late in the game when that happened.
Right.
And isn't it the same ambulance drivers that picked him up drove Kennedy's casket back to them because they were on duty.
Absolutely true. Aubrey Reich and Dennis McGuire. So yeah, they
about
were right
2 hours apart.
Yeah,
not very long.
The epileptic seizure victim, who was identified and was not part of any conspiracy, was depicted as being part of a conspiracy in the Oliver Stone film JFK. So if you've seen that movie, they do dramatize that moment where a guy has an epileptic seizure on the sidewalk, the idea being that he was a distraction so that the assassins could move into. But I believe
every time somebody coughed, they were a distraction for the assassin.
But I think you mentioned in one of your interviews that really people weren't paying that much attention to him.
No, they weren't. They were ready for Kennedy.
Right.
People were lining the street. And in this area, it was only a couple people deep. Mm-hmm. But they were and they'd been waiting. And they were like, gosh, I hope he gets well, you know. Too bad about that guy. When is he coming down the street? So, you know, he got in an ambulance. He got the help he needed.
This is a frame from a home movie shot by Robert Hughes, and you can actually see the sixth floor window of the School Book Depository moments before the assassination. And framed in the doorway there is little Toni, again with your hands in the air. Toni, I think a researcher contacted you about your hands in the air. Tell me about that real quick.
I did not look at any Kennedy movies. I didn't read any books. It just was put aside. Right after it happened, Mother and I didn't think we knew anything. We didn't think there was anything we could offer. And then I don't know if anyone remembers, but there were announcements or discussions in some books that weren't very reliable or credible that said the witnesses are being killed. The witnesses are dying in unusual circumstances. And so it kind of scared us. And I think in one interview I was doing, I said, it kind of scared the dickens out of it or something like that. It was so Texas. It was like, yeah, it kind of scared us. So we didn't come forward. Mm-hmm. And we literally dropped the whole assassination and went about our troubled lives. So I went online one day and typed in my name in Kennedy out of curiosity. And that picture came up. And the line underneath it said, "Is she signaling the assassin?" And my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe that's what somebody thought. And so I wrote back, like all caps, "No, I was 11. I was trying to get his attention." And I did not know the ditch I was stepping off into.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that when you ventured into the research community a little bit. But let's take a look at a little bit of the Hughes film where we can see you in the doorway in motion there. Here comes the car turning from Maine to Houston.
And that's when they leaned together and spoke to each other.
Yeah. I believe I've heard you say that this was one of the most exciting moments, these few seconds, were one of the most exciting moments of your life.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah, there I am trying to wave it. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And for 5 seconds, 6 seconds, I was in the ether. I had been seen, and my life was going to be different from then on, and I was floating, absolutely delirious. Most of the other people were just as delirious just from seeing him, but I had this whole story concocted. So it was incredible. After they passed, people you've been standing there for 2 hours with, you're, "Oh, hi, oh, it was wonderful. They look like movie stars." And then bang, bang, bang. And I went from as high as I've ever been in my life to just the bottom in 6 seconds.
Standing there for so long with your mom, right across from this building, did you see anything? Did you notice anything, any people that stand out in your mind all these years later?
What I have said to people who said, "Why didn't you just look up?" I mean, right there, he's 60 feet or whatever from you. And I said, if you're in a city and someone at the end of the block's head explodes, you think someone down there did it. You don't turn around to see who could have behind me have fired a gun to kill that person. Mm-hmm. So all of the look was what was going on. Never considered looking up.
But even prior to the parade going by, nothing about this nondescript warehouse really stood out in your mind?
I'm going to say no. Okay. I have been interviewed enough that I know I can try to answer a question I really don't know the answer to. Mm-hmm. And I want to say, I did see other people in other buildings, but did I stare up there and go, "Hey, yeah, that'll be great"? I probably would have noticed Jarman and the guys on the 5th floor. Uh-huh. Probably would have seen them. But I don't remember looking up and seeing him. Okay. I may have, after a while, said I did see something, but
As we continue our travel log of home movies from Dealey Plaza, you appear in the sprocket holes of the Bronson film. You can only glimpse Toni for just a moment when Mrs. Bronson leans forward and allows for a brief, clear shot. But there you are, so distinctive in that little blue jacket. Now we're going to watch the Bell film, and this is where we see you the best. Again, for just a fraction of a second. Mr. Bell, Mark Bell, was yet another one who held the camera by the side of his face so we don't get a clear view. I mean, it was exciting. People wanted to see the president. They didn't want to be staring through the viewfinder of a camera. There you are.
Yeah.
Perfectly understandable. And then from the ground level, directly in front of you was the Towner family.
Yes.
Jim Patton and 13-year-old Tina Towner, very close in age to you. And this is a photograph that Jim Towner took. So this is basically...
I was very jealous because she was right next to the car.
She was, yeah. But this is basically the same view you would have had from your vantage point.
That's very realistic from what I saw.
And then as the car moves just a little bit further, getting onto Elm Street, that's a photograph taken by an eyewitness named Phil Willis, who was also standing right around the same area as you. Now, this is where I have to, try to help researchers as much as I can.
All right.
Where was the vehicle when you heard the first sound?
Out of sight.
Okay, so
I could not see it at the first sound. And I'm telling you, there may be some gun experts in the area at the time, but even Jackie thought it was backfiring. I thought it was backfiring. And also understand there were 8 to 10 Harley Davidsons right there. On both sides, in front of his car, the cars behind, etc. So by the time they had gone down Elm, all of these motorcycles were bouncing off the walls. So you hear a bang in the middle of that, and first of all, your soul says that didn't happen. That could not happen. You just deny it straight up. So there was a bang, and everybody kind of, was that a backfire? The second bang, people from Texas kind of went, that's not good. I don't know exactly what's happening, but that doesn't, and that was still out of sight for me. And so I stepped back and turned around so I could look down Elm. And when I did, just when they came in, then his head just exploded. And that's why I tried to tell myself it was what were they? The firecracker that was a ball.
Mm-hmm. Like a little cherry bomb?
Cherry bomb. When they explode, paper goes up. And from my point, I couldn't see red blood. I couldn't see a sparkle, but I could just see gray, burst. And so I was, okay, that's what I can call it. This was fireworks. I turned to Mom and said, Mom, someone threw fireworks in the car and the police are really, really mad. And then she climbed onto the back and Clint Hill jumped on. And any question you'd ever had was answered right there. Something really bad happened. The most sophisticated woman in the world would not have jumped up out of the back seat in a skirt and climbed onto the trunk. That just, you see that and go, this is not going to be a good day when I get home.
What did the plaza sound like in the aftermath? Were there screams, sirens, silence?
Silence. A low murmuring kind of. People up at Elm and Houston didn't see it because the street curved so much back. So there were really only people on Elm that were watching all 3 shots, except for, people in the buildings. I have no idea what they could see or if they looked away. But as soon as he went past all of us onto Elm, that's when you turn around and go, you're talking to everybody you've been talking to for the last hour, and wasn't it fantastic? So all of that was murmuring kind of happening, and then there were the bangs, and people stopped. And it was what happened up on Elm in Houston.
So walk us through what happened next. You were very protective of your mom. You somehow got her down from that 4-foot pedestal there.
I don't know how.
You had some trouble getting down because a young man would not move. Tell us about that.
Okay. I didn't tell anybody this forever because I didn't want to contribute to a possible conspiracy theory, because I get emails and calls all day. I mean, not all day, that's a gross exaggeration, but 5 or 6 times a week I get a package. Right now there's a baseball sitting in my house somebody wants me to sign and send back. And I'm like, so I get this kind of stuff, and I get every person who is under 40 has a new theory, but what about this and what about that? And my standard reply is, get a life. This has been discussed. This has been looked at. You can dig for years. You're not going to probably come up with anything new. And there was a lot of the Cuban or CIA and that kind of stuff. He's not in that picture, I don't think.
No, we're back to the Bell film here.
Right at the side of the pedestal, I had been jumping off it to run back to Maine and come back and talk and run back to Maine. And I was everybody on the corner was, hey, is he close? And I'm, of course, take control. Be the one with the info. The guy. I turned and wanted to get off, and there was a man standing there. And I said, we need to get off. And he looked at me, and then he just turned back around and stayed right there at the And Mom and I went, ooh. So we went onto the fence part and got down on the ground from over there. But she and I talked about it frequently, that what was that guy doing? He wasn't upset. He wasn't running around he was just, I'm not moving. Find some other way down, lady. I'm not going to go anywhere. So I don't know who the guy was. I don't know if he was important. I don't know if he was, some other guy who wandered up. But there were so many theories out there. I just thought somebody's going to take this and make something ridiculous out of it.
But it's always been part of your story. It goes back to your earliest interview here at the museum.
I told that at my interview?
I believe so.
Wow.
If not, someone can watch the video online and prove us wrong. But after you got your mom down, what did you do next? Where did you go? You guys lived in Oak Cliff at the time. Tell us what happened next.
Oswald's rooming house was on Beckley, about 3 blocks from Methodist Hospital, where I was born. I'm going to say his rooming house was 2 miles, 3 miles, Beckley, from our house. And so it kind of followed me home. I mean, at the time, it was, I don't know what happened. It's spectacular. It's horrible. And we're going to go home and watch the news and find out about it. And every half hour, Tippett was shot in Oak Cliff. Tippett was an officer who on the weekend liked extra money. He would stand guard at Austin's Barbecue in Oak Cliff, and we'd go there all the time. He was invisible. We didn't see him. We didn't notice him. But, and then Oswald ran onto Jefferson and was heading down Jefferson. Students in Adamson High School were very close to Patton Street. They heard the gunshot that killed Tippett. And then Oswald ran down there. He made a few, in and outs trying to hide. And the school district released Sunset, 2,000 students, and Adamson, 1,500 students, onto the street to go home. The president's been shot, go home. 3,000 kids are within 5 blocks of Oswald, who's running around with a gun trying to hide somewhere. And, it's just thinking about doing that with so many kids with a gunman running around. But we didn't have mass shootings back then, so we weren't expecting it.
As you watched the TV coverage, as you saw Oswald arrested and you began to understand what you had seen in the plaza, give us a sense of how that impacted you there that weekend. We'll talk about the long-term impact in a moment.
Okay, ask me that again in a second. I'm remembering that I got home and I called Dad and said, Dad, Mom and I were there when it happened. And he said, Toni, I'm really sorry you had to see that. Now that is a dad I didn't see a lot at that time. He and I worked our way out. But as a little kid, I didn't see a softness in him very often. He was a funny guy. He could be pretty funny. But he was just really nice that day when I called. I didn't go into that, well, I was just there to forget about you. But he was very nice about it that day.
Yeah.
He bought a newspaper for all 6 of his kids and whoever else he wanted. I think he bought 12 or 15 at a time for every day for the next week and gave us all this treasure. Nobody has them. I think I had them maybe 15 years, but they're all gone. I remember going through them and looking at things like the Thanksgiving advertisements and the hats and the dresses and the things that were on sale for $10. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know where those papers went.
But the reality of the plan you went to Dealey Plaza with to see Kennedy, the way you saw him as a father figure and then to see him die in such a horrible manner, how does that affect an 11-year-old little girl?
Well, I don't know. I can only know how it affected me. And I wasn't a typical 11-year-old girl. I was smart and I was trying to figure it out, trying to figure everything out, making people happy and feeling good. And the divorce, affected all of this over and over. I was 5 when it happened, and it was still a nuclear bomb situation at 11. It was, it didn't get okay for a while. So what was your question before I interrupted?
What stands out from watching the news, absorbing all of that incessant media coverage of this event, Oswald's arrest, Oswald's shooting, the funeral on Monday? Tell us what
Wow.
stands out most.
That's a lot. This is hard. It was terrible. I think the low point on that day was when Walter Cronkite took off his glasses and cried. It makes me cry to think about it. But we saw that on TV, and it's like, this can't be true. It's still denial. It's still denial. We hung on to that. But when Walter Cronkite did that, it was over. It was just completely over. And then we trickled in about Tippit. But by then, I was kind of numb. I do remember, and I think this scene was repeated in almost every household in the world. My sisters and I, the 4 of us at the time, lined up in front of the TV on the floor, and Mom was on the sofa with our dog. And we were like cocoons, and we were lined up in front of the TV in a kind of spoke wheel thing. And we'd run out of Kleenex hours before, so each of us had a roll of toilet paper right there as we were watching the TV. And I got up and went in the kitchen to get a Dr. Pepper, and I got it, and I walked back to the room and stopped because it was black and white TV. And my sisters' faces were all you could see, and they were gray from the TV light. And so it was like ghosts or some kind of spooky. And Mom was, kind of that light was radiating off her too. And I just, everybody was in front of the TV watching every second to see what was going on. And I looked at that, and I remembered it and thought, wow, everybody looked like this. This is just being repeated worldwide, But it was a shock when I started to go back in, and their ghost faces were lit up watching this TV with their toilet paper. Mm-hmm.
Later that year, you wrote Mrs. Kennedy a letter, which you donated to us in 2012. We're honored to have it. I'm going to put it up on screen here, but I have a transcript of it. And I was hoping you might read this letter from 11-year-old Toni Glover to Jackie Kennedy.
I teach freshmen how to write. So this is not my favorite thing to read. I would point out the words courage, C-O-R-A-G-E, assassination, A-S-S-A-S-Y-N-A-T-I-O-N. So anyhow, I started writing this immediately, but I didn't know what to do with it and put it away. So I picked it up again. Dear Mrs. Kennedy, I want to try and word an experience that happened to me, like she wasn't there. It was Christmas Day. I was watching TV. I was watching TV when something about President Kennedy was shown. I have forgotten what. I sort of asked God what I could do, and like magic, the thought that I would be a woman president came to my mind. The thought that I would try to carry on his fight for peace. I know that nothing could replace a man with such good nature and courage as he, to you, and all the United States of America, but I think someone ought to try. So I'm going to start learning all I can about law. I think and hope I have the brain for such a task. In case you're wondering who wrote this letter, I will tell you. I'm an 11-year-old Dallasite who witnessed the assassination. I am enclosing a picture of myself. This will give you an idea of an ambitious, possibly knuckle-headed girl. Please return a note or something to assure me you received my letter. Sincerely, Toni Glover. Thank you intensely for your time.
That was unsent. Mrs. Kennedy didn't get that letter.
It did not get that letter. I approached my mother a couple of times, and I could never figure out where to send it or how to send it, and to the White House, but she's not going to be in the White. I didn't know where she was at Christmas, actually.
Mm-hmm. We talk a lot at this museum and the exhibits we do and the oral histories we record about the impact of the Kennedy assassination. I've never met anybody that felt the impact maybe on quite such a personal level, being here when it happened, literally at ground zero for the defining moment of your generation. You had a tough time after the assassination. Can you talk a little bit about the years beyond that? And
can you qualify what you mean by a hard time?
Well, I want to leave it open for you to go into as much detail as you feel comfortable discussing.
Wow.
You and I have gone into, we had a pretty intense therapy session when we did your oral history in 2012. I just want to get a sense of how an event like this on a global scale can impact somebody on a deeply personal level.
The impact for me was that it came home with me. Tippit was shot, and then we find out that Oswald is on Jefferson, and that then he lived on Beckley, and it just felt like it was happening to me. And I probably was 30 before it just came crashing down on me that this was a global experience. It didn't just happen to me. It didn't just come to my backyard. So I was very troubled with this for quite a while, yeah. And I had my own array of emotional problems that were coming to play at the time. So I was fighting through it on several different levels. But it, by itself, as I say in the opening of the book, it didn't destroy me by itself. It was another bad thing that happened. It didn't help the other areas that were struggling to survive and recover. It kind of, made it worse. But the assassination itself, I don't know what to say. I was not emotionally destroyed by that. I just added it to the list that I was trying to work on at the time.
Tell us about your first visit when you returned to...
I will admit this, that 3 to 4 years later was the first time I tried to kill myself. How much of that, was still hanging on, was still pressure? I don't know. I didn't have fear running under my skin for 6 seconds, and then it all came back. So, I'm fighting with all of that, and this is just the glowing answer to my prayers was there for 6 seconds, and then it just all crashed and burned.
What was it like coming back here?
Oh, you mean this time?
Not this time. When you first came back, because you were here, I believe, around the 25th anniversary in '88.
I had gone to the little museum that was there before, but then I heard that this was opening up as a major, legit museum. And I came in about 10 years after it was open, and I walked up to the desk downstairs and I said, I need to talk to somebody because I was on the corner when it happened, but I don't want to go in the exhibit, okay? I don't want to go in the exhibit. And he said, oh, okay, and he stepped aside and started making a call, and I left. I was like, I can't do it. So I left. And then as I was finishing my PhD and about to move away, Mom had passed away, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go down there. And I did, and I said, I need to speak with an historian, and they came running out.
This is 99 when you came back.
Yes, and I want to say her name was something Ann.
Yeah, Marion Ann Montgomery.
Marion Ann, yeah. So it was in her office, which at the time overlooked the plaza. And I start telling the story, and I look over, and my pedestal is right there. And so I'm telling him the story, and then they came around, and then they did this, and I just start crying. And I said, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to, they went, no, 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 no. This actually means you were really there, because when we talk to witnesses, they end up crying. And so I thought, well, okay, good. And they said, did you have a camera? No, I didn't have a camera. The only camera there was Zapruder. And you guys looked at me and went, no, there were 70 cameras in the corner at the time. So I only thought there was a Zapruder. I certainly had never seen a picture of myself. And Gary Mack said, what were you wearing? I said, I'm pretty sure I had on my blue ski jacket. But I wasn't going to school, so I probably would have had on blue jeans or something like that. He said, a black skirt. And I said, I don't know. Is that what I had on? And we went down to his office, and he started going through the bits of film, and he came up with that Bell picture. And I fell to the floor on my knees and just started crying. It's like somebody pulling up a picture of Gettysburg, and there you are. You know, it's like, what? And this was 30 years later. And I didn't have any idea there was a picture of me anywhere. So no, he pulled up that picture, and I just fell. And then it was like, okay, I got to get used to this. There's a picture that verifies the memory that I have, but the memory, you know, you're always. So there it was, by God.
By the time you and I met, you had started working on a book, which is it's still in progress, and you took a very interesting approach, because you did research here. I think you ended up watching about between 50 and 100 of our own oral history. And you went out and interviewed people that we helped you find. Tell us about
You did. In particular, Jenny Taylor, I spoke with a lot. Say it again. What part of this, what painful part of this do you want me to relay?
You talked to some interesting people who shared kind of that childhood trauma, like Diane Cody, for example.
Diane Cody, was her birthday, correct?
12 years old, yeah.
12 years old. She was in Oklahoma City or somewhere like that. But it was her birthday. And she remembers going home and rolling up in a blanket and throwing up. That was how it just happened to her. There was another woman who was the same age who I talked to for a while, and I was going to do some kind of little symposium, and I was trying to get people near my age to join us. And then she started talking about the guys she saw in the parking lot with guns and with this and that. And I was kind of, I don't want to do any conspiracy stuff. I really don't. Yeah. And so we didn't do that. But Jenny Taylor is something. She dreamed the night before that a man's head exploded. And she talked to her dad about it at breakfast. And he said, oh, you know, it's okay. You just had a bad dream and that kind of stuff. And then she went with her friend and came down here and was on Main Street. Pretty much at the corner, I think, of Houston and Main. Because after he passed, and what did she say? Was it her? Was she the one who said, he looked me smack in the eye? That was her. And it was true. Both of them, they didn't do this. They went, hi, hi. You know, they waved at people, at individuals. Or they did in Dealey Plaza. There weren't that many people. Mm-hmm. So he did that with her because she was being pushed right up to the car. She was at the front of that Main Street crowd. And as soon as he went around, she and her girlfriend ran down Main Street so they could come into the grassy area from the other side. And I believe they were there when the final shot happened and that they saw it.
What do you gain from talking to these people who shared similar experiences that day?
That I wasn't that unusual, that I wasn't so special, and you know how I like to be special. It's kind of confirmation. It's kind of history settling into what it's going to be. And I didn't feel so alone about it. You know, I was like, okay, other kids my age were there and they survived it. So let's survive it.
Around the 50th anniversary, you dipped your toe into the research waters and you ended up speaking at the JFK Lancer Research Conference, and you engaged with some researchers. Just broadly, tell us a little bit about what that experience was like.
Let me tell you about the Lancer, which I didn't know at the time kind of is a conspiracy. I went there, and my talk was, I was there, I don't know who killed Kennedy, it didn't give me any insight, I was just there. And so I'm going to tell you my story, but I don't know anything. I don't know who killed Kennedy, none of this. And so I gave my talk, and then I was this, and then there's the picture, and there's this, and there's this, and I finished it and for questions. And the first hand that went up, the guy said, did they rappel down the freight elevators or the other elevators? And I looked at the rest of the audience, and they just started laughing. I was like, I don't know. I didn't know there were 2 elevators in the building. I don't know what you're talking about. And you know, I'm not the person to ask. At one point, I was doing online really in-depth questions and answers with historians and theorists, and everybody was in the mix. And I had to just at one point say, you guys, I really like to please people. And so I'm trying to answer your questions, but I think I don't know the answers. And I'm trying to come up with the answers because I want, you know, I want to please you. I want to have an answer for you. But I'm just going to stop right here. We're not going to do any more of this because I'm concerned I'll start making up things that I hoped had happened or that you're suggesting happened or without any real memory.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the book.
I want to write something that gives an idea about a witness, and not that they were tabula rasa and showed up at the Kennedy assassination and were affected by it. Everybody there brought an emotional landscape from their lives, good and bad, and so it hit everyone differently. And I just thought that was important. So I start the book with just a chapter about me at 5, a couple things that happened. So, you know, it's not a perfect kid that's going there. And then I start 6 a.m. on November 22nd. Kennedy slept, Oswald slept, I did not. I was on the roof of our house on Hampton Road. I climbed up there all the time. Mother would have had a fit if she knew it. But I was up there just huddled in my blue ski jacket because it was drizzling rain, looking out at, you know, the skyline of Dallas. And that red horse, it was cloudy that morning, so the head was decapitated and the legs were all fuzzy. So there's just this body of a horse, red horse, over the skyline of Dallas. And I knew, I couldn't see Dealey Plaza, but I knew it was dark and cold and we were all gonna be there. So I say, this is what I was doing, and then I say, 8:15, George walks in and wakes up President Kennedy, and they start to get dressed, and then I go, so I take a timeline, and we're all gonna get to Dealey Plaza. You know, that's where the 3 of us are gonna end up. But I just try to trace their steps that day as time went on, and my steps that day as time went on. Their contribution is obvious, the president and the assassin. My contribution is trying to ground it. And so I have, they're nice stories, Judy. I have stories from our family that are very, very funny. My mother getting a speeding ticket in West Texas going 115 miles an hour. The police couldn't catch her, so he had to radio ahead and have somebody come and cut her off. And we were trying to get to Amarillo on a ski trip because my dad was flying into Amarillo. He didn't like to wait, so we really need to be there on time. And the cop said, "Why are you going 100?" And she said, "I'm trying to beat a plane." Swear to God, that's what she said. I'm trying to beat a plane. He said, "Well, you're not."
You've been kind enough to share a couple of sample chapters with me, and I've really enjoyed reading them. And as you know, I'd like to close out our conversation tonight by having you read the introduction if you're okay with that.
I'm okay with the introduction. I can't read chapter 1 without
Just this part right
collapsing.
here, but I think that's a perfect way to kind of sum up this experience tonight.
Right. I don't even think I have a huge ego, but someone told me to always mention I was the girl in blue. So, and I'm going to give the little quote before it. Each chapter I give a little quote. This one is from Mary Carr. You guys familiar with the Liars Club? She's a Texas kid. And she says, memory is a pinball in a machine. It ricochets between image, idea, fragments of scenes, stories you've heard. Then the machine goes tilt and everything stops. And I think that's the best description of memory I have ever had. So here we go. I am the girl in blue. I didn't know the blue ski jacket I grabbed on the way out of the den that morning would go down in infamy. Like most witnesses, I went to Dealey Plaza with a complicated life. By 11, I'd had moments of joy and laughter, but I was also haunted by some painful, core-shaking experiences. Another 11-year-old girl across the street from me brought battle scars from growing up with 2 alcoholic parents. My mom brought paralyzing depression from a vicious, embarrassing divorce. I brought fear. For most of my life, I've lived with fear that slithers around under my skin like a low-voltage current. Magical thinking helped me create a world where I was safe. In November of 1963, I believed Kennedy had supernatural powers. And if I could get him to look at me, if I could get him to wave, that would mean he knew me and nobody would hurt a kid Kennedy knew. When people ask me if the events of that day destroyed my life, I tell them no. As a single event, Kennedy's death did not shatter me emotionally. Instead, it piled on to the pieces that were already broken.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We have a couple of minutes if there are any questions. I'll repeat them since we've got the microphones up here, but any questions for Toni Glover? Yeah, Tom.
Can I ask you, I know you were young at the time, but from where you were standing, did you feel the shots came, did they originate from one place, do you think?
I have no idea. I wasn't even sure the first 1 or 2 were shots. And people have asked me how many seconds between each one and so forth. I have no idea.
The sound?
The sound different?
Yeah, from the different shots.
I don't remember a difference, if there was. I can't tell you there wasn't or there was. I don't remember that though.
As far as coming from like different directions, you mean?
Yeah.
Was there a consistency that you recall?
Well, I didn't feel like they were coming from, wild places like that, excuse me. But I can't tell you that they all came from this window. Somewhere in the plaza they were coming from. And I'm sorry for anyone who disagrees, I am an Oswald Did It person. There is so much evidence that he was in that window, fingerprints, he bought the rifle, 3 shells were on the ground, on and on and on. He left his wedding ring that morning. So I believe Oswald was in that window, and I believe he fired 3 shots. Some people think there was someone on the South Knoll, and there have been bizarre ones. They fired out of the gutter. That was a really tricky one, huh? But I have no evidence that they came from far away or in any other. Bear in mind, sound bounces off these buildings. It just echoes. And when you have 8 or 9 Harley Davidsons at the intersection at the same time, how many seconds? I don't know. I wasn't even, the din of noise, I wasn't even sure that first one was a shot. But the second one, like I said, in Texas, you've heard a rifle. And, I was disturbed enough to wheel around, and as I explained to you, the top of that thing, it's a miracle I didn't fall right off. But I was able to spin around and I was gonna follow them right under that bridge, and just as they came into sight, boom, gray just went everywhere. So I have been back here a number of times. I have never gone through the exhibit. I could not go through the exhibit until yesterday. or the day before?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. And I did a really good job. I did not cry. I did not cry.
You had a curator and a psychologist on either side of you, so we made it through.
And I was like, oh, I left my meds in my purse somewhere. I think I might need one if I go through this. So, yeah, it was a psychologist.
Did looking out that window onto the landscape of the plaza where you were,
Yeah.
I mean, seeing it from that perspective for the first time, what was that like?
It was not good. I had angry stuff, sad, whatever, feelings about looking down there and knowing that at some point he was looking at me. We were the only ones there for a long time. And to look at that pedestal, it's just, it's just not a good feeling. 61 years later, it's not a good feeling. It's not something that's going to heal and all be whatever, because it's just an ongoing discussion like this, on and on and on. And I finally have, come out of the closet and said, I saw Kennedy get shot. So now I am
Now you have
answering
baseballs to
lots
sign.
of questions and fielding lots of emails. And I get an occasional letter from a prisoner saying, can you put money in my canteen account? I saw your interview on CNN. Could you send $25 for my... Anyhow, there's a young girl right now in Australia who made up a composite picture. There's a picture of me at the 50th standing on the pedestal. Mm-hmm. And there's that picture and then me at the 50th standing on the same pedestal. And even though our backs are turned, there's this square girl and this square woman. We look very similar to that one.
Yeah. Any other questions for Toni Glover tonight? Yeah.
You had this intense moment as a child, and it came from this communal memory. And you probably experienced this from all sorts of different angles. What would you say about the reliability of our memory?
Oh, memories suck. Memory, no. Memory is, is a harlot that you can't always get a hold of. It comes and goes. It gets fuzzy, and then someone will mention something. And I go, oh, yeah, there was that guy standing there. It'll come back. But I've never been hypnotized. Anybody ask me about it? But I mean, I can say what I saw and what I felt and what happened that day. I start every interview with, I do not know who killed Kennedy. I have nothing controversial to say. All I can tell you is what I saw and what I felt. And, since I'm writing this, I've done, my job, which is research. And I found out a lot more. It's important to me in this book, I'm weaving this timeline, and it kind of anticipates as it goes. But it's important to me to pull out nuggets that people don't know about or people don't remember. And so I'm in this research trying to find a cute or interesting thing to talk about, not the same thing everybody talks about in every book. And one of those things was the fight at Parkland, because Secret Service, of course, they're all horrified, they're crying, they failed, and they're at the hospital, and everyone knows. I mean, his skull was half empty. So they all know what's going on, and they finally pronounce him dead, and O'Neill gets there with the coffin, and they're starting to leave, and the coroner comes up and says, no. He was killed in Texas. He has to have an autopsy in Texas right now. And they said, no, go get a judge. We'll do this. And they piddled around for, I don't know how long, 45 minutes maybe. And then the Secret Service walked up to the front guy, and Jackie was standing behind the casket. And he said, Mrs. Kennedy has had a bad day. And she is going back to Air Force One and Washington, D.C. And she's not leaving without her husband. So you need to step aside. They did not step aside. It actually became nobody pulled out fists, nobody pulled out guns. But just below that, there was a lot of colorful language going on back and forth. And so little things like that, people don't know about always. And there are a lot of other little things that happen. The pilot that got the news and grabbed the co-pilot and ran to the back of the plane with pliers and ratchets and everything they could, because they had to get seats out to put a coffin in. And so they're back there trying to do that. The handles of the coffin breaking off because it wouldn't fit through the door of the airplane. There's just a lot of things that go on. And I'll close with this. I happen to find it very interesting about the coffins that were used. The one here was a 400-pound brass, gorgeous coffin. And when he got to Parkland and saw the condition of the president's body, he said, no, we got to put nylon plastic all over the inside of the coffin. They wrapped his head in all kinds of things, trying, to preserve it. And it didn't work. When they got to D.C., it was just gory. But they did the autopsy in D.C., and Jackie, the family's waiting at 4 a.m. They say, okay, we're through. And they said, well, we can't put him back in that coffin. So they got an African mahogany coffin, I think. And the bloody coffin, it's called, was stored. It was just put aside. And people, I think, forgot about it. And at one point, someone realized it was there and asked the family, what are we going to do with this? It will become a macabre, if somebody gets a hold of it. So the Air Force, or the Navy, he was Navy, said, we'll take care of it. And they took the coffin and they put it in a wooden box, and they drilled holes all in the wooden box. And they took it out on a plane to the middle of the Atlantic where that trench, there's a deep, deep part. And they dropped that coffin over the trench so it would sink and nobody would ever find it again. And I think they accomplished it. Yeah. But that was just amazing. I'm just sitting there going, what? They did what? Wow. So, and the coroner who wanted to do Kenny's, 3 hours later did Tippett's autopsy, and 2 days later did Oswald's autopsy. Yeah. So he didn't do Kennedy's, but he ended up with everything else that happened.
Well, I hope that you will come back when the book is out, because we can continue this conversation.
Well, since I've been working on it for 10 years, can I come back before I finish?
You certainly can. You are always
be
welcome.
Another 10 years.
Always welcome here in Dealey Plaza. Please join me in thanking Toni Glover for being our guest tonight.
Thank you.